When Big Ben Stopped. A short story by P.J. Leonard. Nobody expected the bell of Big Ben to freeze 1 second before midnight on the 31st of December. Least of all me. After all, I'm the mechanic who maintains the thing. But that wasn't even the most shocking thing. No, it was the fact that everybody else in the world had frozen with it. I sat there on the sofa, an unexploded party popper in my hands, and a half-drunk can of beer squeezed between my knees. My wife was like a statue beside me as she was halfway through launching into the air, her glass of champagne spilling out, but frozen in place, as though it were ice. My sister and her boyfriend were on the chair nearby, eyes wide and fixed on the TV, showing the unmoving face of Big Ben. But I could move. First I tested my neck, rolling it back and forth. Then I tried the party popper. Bang! The streams of paper flew across the room and draped themselves across my sister's face. I moved my legs, and my beer dropped to the floor, sloshing across the carpet. All my body parts were working well so far. Was this some kind of joke? I stood up, waving a hand in front of my wife's face. Nothing. I turned, throwing a fist at my sister's boyfriend, but stopping just short of actually hitting him. He didn't even blink. Was this real? I picked up the remote. Flicking through the channels, I saw the news reports and TV shows all frozen in place too. I pulled aside the curtains and looked out of the window. Some fireworks that had been launched a little bit too early hung in the night sky, half exploded. I opened the window. Utter silence flowed in. Not even a breeze whistled by. For some reason, I couldn't tell. I just knew that the world had been frozen still. Except me. But why me? Why did the whole world stop 1 second before the new year, except for me? Frowning, I picked up the remote again and turned the TV back to the picture of Big Ben, that face I knew so well, the hands frozen, a whisker away from 12. Is that why? Because I'm the mechanic of Big Ben? Do I need to go over there and fix it? Will that make the whole world move again? It seemed crazy, ridiculous. But I couldn't think of any other possible reason why the only person left moving on the earth was the chief mechanic of Big Ben. I knew it was a big responsibility when I took the job, maintaining the most famous clock tower in the world, but I wouldn't have guessed it controlled time itself. I rushed upstairs and changed into my sturdy work overalls. I grabbed my tool bag and car keys and headed out into the cold night. The car didn't even make a whining noise as I tried to get it started. So even machines were affected too? Sighing, I grabbed my tool bag from the passenger seat, stepped out of the car and looked around. I lived in London, but far from Westminster. If cars were out, then buses and trains would definitely be out too. I'd have to walk it. I puffed out my cheeks and watched the steam rise before me. It was nice to see something moving for a change. I swung my tool bag over my shoulder and started walking down the street. If I had to walk, then so be it. Besides, I had all the time in the world. To say I had to fight through the New Year's Eve crowds around Westminster makes it sound like I really had to force my way through the masses of people gathered to see the fireworks. But they didn't put up any fight. In fact, it was a lot like pushing my way through the world's biggest mannequin factory. Although the people were all facing different directions, from the face of Big Ben itself to the skies in anticipation of the fireworks, They were all pulling the same face, their lips pursed in an ooh, as if they were all going to say the word one, which is exactly what they were doing when time stopped. I found a clear patch of tarmac on Westminster Bridge and took a moment to just stand there and take it all in. I'd never seen any part of London so still, so silent, let alone this bridge. I would have found it strange if it wasn't so creepy. I turned to look up at Big Ben. That was the strangest of all for me, seeing those clock faces that I worked with every day, the hands moving at a sure and steady pace around those Roman numerals. Only 3 times in the last 150 years had Big Ben stopped, all of them for planned stoppages, for maintenance. And this didn't look like a plan. If it did, I would have known about it. I pushed my way through the silent crowds until I arrived at the edge of the Houses of Parliament. Pulling out a huge ring of keys from my overalls, I unlocked the iron gate. I nearly jumped at the sound of the metal iron gate squeaking as the gate swung open. I hoisted up my bag, descended the stone steps, and rounded the corner of the foot of Big Ben to the maintenance door, a rather unremarkable steel door with rust at the edges. With another flourish of my keys, I was inside the cool dark of Big Ben. I took a long, deep breath. This, at least, felt normal. It was quiet and dark in here all the time, even when the outside world was bustling. But after I finished my long breath and silence fell, my hands started to tremble again. It was meant to be quiet here, but never silent. The reassuring clicks and clunks and ticks and tocks of the cogs and wheels of Big Ben's insides were not to be heard. I cracked a knuckle to break the silence. Enough of this. Whatever was the cause of this frozen time lay in the control room at the top of the tower. That I was sure about. I turned and made for the lift, then immediately stopped. The doors were already open, revealing the dark insides. Power out. That didn't surprise me. My car had been out as well. But inside, taped to the back wall of the lift, was a note. The paper looked as though it had been scrunched and smoothed out several times, but the writing on it was as clear as though it had just been printed. 1 word, 4 letters. Walk. Crash! I nearly jumped out of my skin at the noise of metal hitting concrete. I turned to see that I'd dropped my bag on the floor. Heart pounding, I held my breath until the echoes faded away. So, somebody was behind this after all. But who? Who held the power to stop not just Big Ben, but the whole world? With a shaking hand, I picked up my bag and made my way slowly up the stairs. They zigzagged their way up through the tower, through an odd mix of architecture. The stairs themselves were of functional steel, passing through sweeping Gothic arches and plain pillars of concrete. As I reached the higher flights of stairs and my legs began to ache, I spotted the cogs, poles, weights and counterweights gleaming a dark bronze through the darkness. It felt weird, seeing it all so still. It made me dizzy in a way, like walking up an escalator when it stopped. Finally, the staircase levelled off onto a boardwalk leading up to a heavy wooden door. I knew that door as well as anyone who worked in an office knew their own entrance. The number of times I'd unlocked that door and walked into the main hall containing the bell of Big Ben itself without even thinking about it. Not even on my first day on the job had I been this nervous. I had no idea what lay beyond that door now. I wouldn't have been surprised if the whole bell had disappeared. I puffed out my cheeks and shivered as I reached for my keys one more time, crossed the boardwalk, and opened the door before I could think twice about it. With a great heave, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The bell room would have been a vast hall had it not been for the bell that hung from the belfry above, a huge grey shape the size of a house, surrounded on all four sides by the clock faces. Only a little light managed to push weakly through the clock faces, dimly lighting the bell room. It all seemed so normal. I walked across the floorboards, knowing exactly where to step to avoid the creaky ones. I placed my bag down by my workbench, propped it up against the wall, and flexed my aching shoulder as I gazed through the tiny gap in the nearby clock face to the bridge far below. Still full of people, still all as still as ice. "You took your time." I turned around so fast, and I reached out to grab something to steady myself on. Standing beside the door was a figure, as black as a coal stain, leaning against the wall. I unzipped my bag and pulled out my biggest wrench, but when I looked up again, the figure was gone. "Oh, come now, there's no need for that," came the voice, now much closer, almost whispering in my ear. I swung the wrench around and staggered again as it sliced through empty air. "Put that thing down, please," said the voice, now behind me. "I wish only to talk." I turned, but I didn't swing the wrench this time. The figure stood right before me, barely an arm's length away. How had he moved so fast? It was definitely the same person who'd been by the door only a couple of seconds ago. Who are you?" I managed to say. The figure sighed, steam rising over its head. "Look, I'm trying my best not to come across as something to be feared here. Turn the light on and let's talk." I reached across the workbench, grasping for the desk lamp. My fingers closed around its neck, and I followed it down to the base and flicked the switch. I blinked in the bright light and shielded them to look at the figure. Except he was gone. Again. Had that been in my mind? "Sorry," the figure chuckled, his voice echoing from afar. I turned to see him standing in the most distant corner of the bell room. I can't help myself. The look on the face of a human when I do that, it's timeless. "Who are you?" I said more firmly this time, gripping the wrench tighter. He walked across the room in long strides, his long black coat billowing and curly hair bouncing. He looked not old, but not young either. There weren't any telling features to this man's face that gave a hint to his age. "Time," he said. I frowned. Is this some kind of joke?" I said, looking at the surrounding clock faces, all pointing to midnight. "No, I mean, I am time," he said, "and time is me. I do not have a name, not really, but if I were to have one, yes, you would call me Time." This concludes the sample of When Big Ben Stopped by P.J. Leonard. If you have enjoyed this story and wish to continue, you can download the complete story in ebook or PDF form from the link in the description below, available from January 31st, 2017. This download will be free. However, if you wish to support my work, please also consider downloading a paid novel by visiting the store on my website, the link of which is also in the description and also on my Smashwords account. Thank you.